real quick, you have a tool. It's pretty basic. It's a clicker that never requires you to have a battery go wrong. It never requires you to make a polling session in PowerPoint. You don't have to have a receiver in the classroom. And it provides a tremendous amount of pedagogical value to you as an instructor that clickers don't give you. I get to see all your votes in real time, in class, every time. And almost everybody's going to vote every single time, because I only have to make fun of a couple of you for you to realize that I can see you and that you have to vote. And everybody votes at the same time, because you're all going to vote when I count to 3. There are rules to voting. I'm going to give you the 2 rules. Voting should be done simultaneously and anonymously. These are pedagogical rules. They change the nature of what's happening in the classroom environment if you follow them. Simultaneous, meaning on 3 when I count to 3, and anonymous, meaning when you go to vote, and I see some of you already know how to use this tool because you're already folding, you want to be able to represent any one vote at a time. So this would be me voting A. But I don't vote here where others can see it. In fact, I don't even show my vote until I count to 3. Awesome. You guys are already trained to fill in the blank. Very good. Okay. And you vote here where only I can see it. So it remains anonymous. And if you want to fake out the person next to you, you kind of hold the wrong vote for a little while until 3 comes up. All right? So just something to think about. Something to also use this and tell your students about is if I'm ever asking you a question, you're like, you know what? I really have no idea what you're asking me about. This is I don't know. And this is a legit vote. I need to know this today in here. If I ask you a question, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, for instance, what's the Schwarzschild radius of a 3 solar mass main sequence star? I have no idea. There you go. Okay, that's an important vote to be. And some of you are like, I do know. Hold on. What are my choices? Okay, relax. Okay. But just keep that in mind. That's a very valuable, and this is something students start to find value in. They're like, wait, I can vote that way and I'm not getting penalized for it. No, there's not a penalty here. There's no points involved. And when you go to talk to your neighbor about your answers, the other good thing that comes from this is you're holding a vote. It's awfully hard to lie about what my vote was when I go to turn to my neighbor. And the voting and the conversation all kind of start to work together. So I'm just bringing this up because we're going to do a little bit of this while we're in the workshop. My students vote. As you look at this picture, you can immediately kind of see the pink votes that are quite common and the white votes. I didn't talk about this yet. If you need to vote E, the choice E, that's E, white. So you can see there's a lot of people, huge groups of people voting E, and other groups of people not voting E. In geographically otherwise unknown areas, if you were using clickers, you wouldn't know where they were voting those 2 different votes, which gives you certain tools to work with in the class. You're like, could I get the E's and the A's into a fight? Could I get them into discourse with one another? My class's currency is discourse. I want people to engage in evidence-based decision-making. I want people to engage in trying to convince each other that they're right. Imagine you and your significant other disagree about something. And it's something that's kind of lasted in your relationship for a while. And you've decided it's time to convince them that you're right. You bring everything you know from your relationship forward in this argument with you. All of the history, everything, to win that discourse. When you act in the place of convincing somebody you're right, you're operating in the most intellectually rich place you can put people. So my goal in class is to try to get students into a place where they're asked to convince their neighbor they're right. I have a question for you. You have your cards ready. You've now seen everything you need to see a real question. Here's a real, if you want to know what the level of my class's difficulty really is, this is what my class is really like. Do not talk to your neighbor. Do you need more time? As a reminder, please don't forget this vote. Let's just go ahead and vote on 3. That's just the first voting. This is your individual voting. Give it a shot. Let's vote on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's a rainbow. That's awesome. Turn to your neighbor. Listen to these words carefully. Don't start doing anything about this question. Listen to these words carefully. These are the implementation words that matter. Often faculty, when they use clickers or any kind of classroom response system, connected to a thoughtful think, pair, share type question. They miss all the teachable moments. They don't make people to commit to an answer individually without showing them the results first. You guys have no idea. In fact, I put your results in jeopardy by saying it's a rainbow. You don't actually have any idea now what the votes are. When you show a bar graph during the first voting, you already lost. It's over. People will gravitate to whatever bar starts growing first and not think because they want to be right. It's over. All of the intellectual discourse that could have happened may have been lost right there. Having to vote where I can see it creates a social pressure that you're feeling, that you want to be right because you know I'm judging you. I love to say that to myself. I'm totally judging you. You could just say, I'm going to watch what you vote and try to help you. You can frame that however you want, but it's going to come across as I'm judging you. You can't help it. That creates a desire to be right. Now, the other thing is you're currently holding a vote. Put your votes back up. In holding a vote, when I ask you to turn to your neighbor, you're going to know what you have to talk about because it's right there. You can't when you click, you're like, yeah, me too. Yeah, I voted that too. Totally, yeah. You don't know. Nobody knows, right? And they get away with it as a result. No little green light came on above their head with a letter on it. Nothing happened like that. So the other thing is, what do you say to them next? This is maybe the most important thing about using clickers or peer instruction in the classroom. Many faculty will say, well, I'd like you to have a conversation with the people next to you and really kind of, think about together all of your ideas and have, a little bit of a dialogue together. Nothing really productive actually happens in those environments at the level of what I'm going to use as a phrasing. And I've been experimenting with different prompts for a decade, and this is the one that produces the most fruit. Turn to your neighbor and convince them that you're right. Just because you have the same answer does not mean you're right. Make sure you explain your reasoning. Then one more piece, an amount of time that is unfair. You have about 30 seconds, which I never keep to. Right? I don't know how much time it's going to take. It's going to be based on you guys talking. And then a last social prompt that everybody understands. Go. What happens is if you say, I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and talk to each other and explain your ideas to each other, have a nice conversation. The class is looking at you like, do we go now? What do we do? And that idea of have a conversation is not at an intellectual level as convince your neighbor you're right. As soon as I said, convince your neighbor you're right, your brain actually heard, I'm right. And as soon as you think you're right, you change your conversation completely to an argument of convincing. And that's the deepest level of intellectual engagement I can get you to. So put your votes back up. Turn to your neighbor. Convince them that you're right. Just because you have the same answer does not mean you're right. You got about 30 seconds. Go. Time. Pause. 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 Some of you have PhDs and you can't help yourself. You need to know if you're right. I get it. The worst part is I'm not even going to let you vote again. It's over. Okay, let it go. Let it go. Some of you are going to be at dinner tonight going, I still need to know. Sorry. But right now, you either want to talk more or you want to vote and know if you're right. You really do. You guys were gesturing. I mean, half of you are like, right? This question is a vehicle. It's a vehicle for discourse. It was planned. It was created at the beginning of teaching about this topic, not at the end. We started with this question. We said, what's a question that you have to have an entire mental model of how to find extrasolar planets to be able to defend your answer to somebody else about? And yes, it's multiple choice. It has an incredibly powerful discrimination value on assessment instruments. It has the ability to tease out those that have the complete model from those that don't at a very high level. And yet it's extremely difficult. Not everybody gets it right. Most people don't. And people get it wrong for predictable reasons. I can actually tell you many of the things that your reasoning errors were already involving. Like, for instance, did you even notice that this says Earth is over there? Yeah, somebody just went, what?
It says Earth is over there.
No, it doesn't. It says Earth is over there. Anyway, wow, okay. So there's many pieces to this. You have to use the opposite. Some of you just saw the question pop up and are trying to solve it again right now. You can't help yourself, so I have to move on.